So today we are going to discuss about, you know, diabetes, right? And uh, why glycemic index is a wrong approach, and why CGMs are not the right way to actually track, and what we are
Yeah,
actually missing when it comes to type 2 diabetes, right? So that's
right.
that's the whole thing. So I think sir, we have seen that you know a recent news came that 101 million people are suffering or at the risk of developing type 2 diabetes, right? And uh,
Correct.
this has actually, over last 5 years, the number of people, even younger generation, right, developing diabetes has
Mm.
increased a lot, right?
Yeah.
So, so again,
So diabetes is a big problem. It runs in the families.
mhm. But exactly it is. So the first thing, it's a misnomer that if my mother has diabetes, I will also have diabetes. It's it's really a misnomer. It's because
Right.
our biology is so unique, right? So so
Correct.
what works for me may not work for my wife, may not work for my mother. So if my mother has an gene which can cause diabetes, doesn't mean I will also cause diabetes. I will develop diabetes. That's all wrong notions what we have right now. Uh, and again, so what I've seen is, a number of companies in India, right? Well, I think it, last 5 years, we have seen number of companies in India developing solutions. What I've seen first, they started, okay, we can give you high protein diets, we can give you some sort of low carb diets, right, based on your blood work, diagnostic tests, so we can help you manage your blood sugar
Right.
levels, right? Or then now we have these things called CGMs, right? Continuous
Correct.
glucose monitoring machines, and which we stick on our hand and we check whether a particular food is going to meal, actually not food, right? Meal is going to
Correct.
spike blood sugar level or not, right? So that is something which is actually, what I believe is just another way to extract money. It doesn't help, to be very frank. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Correct.
Yeah. So what
Right.
is your view on this? Because before we delve further into this.
Yeah. So see, one thing is very clear. That diabetes is a big problem, in India as well as globally because of the lifestyle which we all have.
Mhm.
Uh, India is called the diabetic capital of the world. We are anyway now the largest populated nation in the world, and then you have diabetic population in the world. And there are a lot of beliefs and disbeliefs or whatever is linked to these. And a lot of people are making a lot of money by scaring people out of diabetes. So they talk about the programs, they talk about diabetes, but
Mm.
as you are discussing, and I'm in full alignment with you that a lot is actually dependent on the expression, gene expression of microbes inside our
Mm.
body versus host
Mm.
expression and how the
Mm.
whole plays out. So it's a big
Mm.
industry, no doubt,
Mm.
and people
Mm.
are trying to make money out of it. Again, no doubt.
Mm.
They mislead people.
Mm.
Again, no doubt on
Mm.
that. I think you are
Mhm.
doing fabulous work. And I also
Mm.
know some of the authors, which we are planning to bring on the Athletics channel very shortly.
Mm.
So they
Mm.
all are talking about microbiome and its role in various things including diabetes. So good that you chose
Mm.
that topic today. So let's talk
Mm.
about it in detail, and from your point of
Yeah.
view, what should be the right
Yeah.
way for a diabetic patient or somebody who wants to prevent diabetes? Yeah.
So everyone, for the benefit of listeners, let's go down to some basics first, right? Before we delve into diabetes, right? Uh,
Yeah.
so essentially, what we know of is that our body has, this is something we know, these are facts, 25,000 genes we get from our parents, right? 25 million genes we get from our microbes, right? And it is, as you
Right.
mentioned, it's our genes expression, right? So the thing is, by the fact that epigenetically
Correct.
we are only 1% human being, so So we have very limited capacity to metabolize a lot of food we eat, right? And it boils down to our microbiome, whether it is in our
Correct.
mouth, we can discuss whether it's in our gut, right? These are the two major colonizers of the microbes, right? And these play a key role. So mouth is the starting part of the digestive tube, and then you have gut at the end of the digestive tube, right? So again,
Right.
so let us go that, because if you talk of someone is pre-diabetic or has type 2 diabetes, right? It is a last
Mm,
stage of metabolic disease, last stage of
mm.
metabolic syndrome, right? Because we
Okay.
started developing, if I have diabetes or type 2 diabetes right now, I started developing 15 years back, right?
Mm,
So
okay.
yesterday
Mm,
I posted this, that what happens is right now what is happening is that healthcare, right? There are two strategies which have been going on for so many years. One is, we know, is
correct.
the research strategy, right? So that we have a lot of scientists and researchers and biotechnologists, right? Bioinformation, we're doing a lot of research papers around microbiome, on human genes, oral microbiome, gut microbiome, skin microbiome, all these things. But most of these papers, you know, find themselves in cloud servers, right? So we do a research,
Mm,
whether it is sample size is 550,000, 100, or 2,000 or 5,000, 10,000, it actually has a very limited application, because most of these papers we do a research and it sits there, right? There's no further usage of those papers, right? That is first thing,
correct.
and that's what we are actually using, that we are using those existing papers and applying in bringing the real solution for the people out here, right? So that is one thing,
Right.
right?
Right.
Other thing is the pharmaceutical strategy, right? Which is adopted by doctors.
Mm,
So every time we have a symptom, we take drug, and we are making our health condition a bit more bearable, right? But eventually
mm,
we are just
mm.
deferring death. We are not going to recover from the disease. We are going to just manage the symptoms, right? And it goes
Correct.
down to the fact that, since you are a biotechnologist, you have been, in this field, you know it well, that our body uh, releases a lot of pro-inflammatory molecules, right? Uh, right at the initial stage, when we have not even
Absolutely.
developed a disease, right? And these molecules are something like cytokines, like TNF alpha, and all these, which are overexpressed, right? To some extent, they are required because
Mm,
inflammation is required, right? To to kill the external pathogen.
correct.
But when there's systemic inflammation, or low grade chronic inflammation, there's overexpression of these molecules, and these molecules is what you know alters our physiology. Now, since last 20-30 years, we don't have any of the you know tests or investigations which can
Mm,
decode these molecular signatures in every human being, also because the technology was so costly earlier, right? We didn't have
yeah.
technologies what we have now, right? So we
Mm,
don't know we have developing that disease, and after 5 years, 7 years, when those molecules indications gets converted into symptoms, now we are diagnosing those disease, we are developed those symptoms, right? Now we go to a
mm,
doctor. Oh, I have headache. I have, excess urination. I have blood sugar escalation. So let me give you metformin. Let me give you, some drugs. Let me give you statins, right? Uh, uh, so let us
correct.
suppress your symptoms, and then you have 50 symptoms. You have 50 drugs, right? That's a
Correct.
pharmaceutical strategy which is being adopted. So essentially the focus, as I mentioned, it started 15 years back. So there are molecular indications which happens, right? Which
Correct. Correct.
triggers the onset and development of the disease, right? So,
Mm,
so
mm,
when, in case of type 2 diabetes, it is the gut microbial dysbiosis and the oral microbial dysbiosis, right? Which
mm,
creates
mm.
a situation where, because these pro-inflammatory molecules first are insulin spikes, right? Then are glucose
Right.
spikes, then are HbA1c spikes, right? So
Correct.
essentially,
Correct.
uh, the first thing should be, we should focus on stopping the insulin from spiking at the first place, not from blood sugar. Now
Mm,
what happens is, so let us discuss this thing, sir. The glycemic index,
yeah.
right? which
Yeah. Let's
is
talk.
which is a
Yeah.
term which is a term coined by a lot of healthcare practitioners. Now, if I see
Mm,
watermelon, right? Watermelon has, suppose, I'm not sure, but I think it has a glycemic index of 55, right? So you may say, okay, don't eat watermelon, it has a high glycemic index, or maybe don't eat mango, it has a high glycemic index, right? Or maybe
Hmm.
eat oats, it has low glycemic index. But this all things work on a basic premise that
Hmm.
every individual metabolizes the food in the same way. So if
Hmm.
you and me are going to consume apple or banana, right? It assumes that
Hmm.
you and me, our body is going to spike, or insulin has to be released, will be released in the same way to
Hmm.
regulate the, because traditionally we think banana is high in sugar, so banana will cause diabetes and all that. But we know that banana is really a prebiotic. It has a lot of vitamins and minerals and phosphorus, right? So essentially,
Absolutely.
when we are saying that your and mind body responds to banana in the same way, which is wrong, right?
Yeah,
Right.
yeah.
So,
We all have a different mechanism of uh, reacting to the food, not
yeah,
reacting, metabolizing the food. You correctly
yeah,
said that. Yeah.
yeah. So another thing is that we are doing counting calories. We are saying, okay, I eat this. Probably if I eat sugar, right? Okay, this has this much calorie. I
Hmm.
can eat a bit of sugar. There's a bit of sulfur. That's fine. It doesn't matter. जरा सा खाने से कुछ नहीं होता, right? But the point is, it is about how that sugar is being metabolized. It is not about calories. It is about how it is
Hmm.
metabolized and what it is being synthesized into, right? So,
Correct. Yeah.
I'll share something, right? So, if you see, what matters is the glycemic response, or how
Hmm.
individuals response to different foods, right? So if you
Hmm.
these
Hmm.
see these two guys, John and Matthew, right? Both ate
Hmm.
banana and watermelon, right? For John,
Hmm.
banana spiked the blood glucose level much faster as compared to Matthew, and for Matthew it was flip side, other side, right? So
Ah,
essentially,
okay. Hmm.
my body may spike my insulin by consumption of potato much higher than the consumption of sweet potato. It may be different for you entirely, right? So
Hmm.
what matters
Hmm.
is the
Correct.
glycemic response, right? And
Response.
what
Yeah.
matters is
Hmm.
how do we, uh, understand whether we have this, insulin spike or not, right?
Yeah.
Because right now what is happening is whether we are doing blood work, so we check HbA1c levels, or we check blood sugar levels, or when we go for CGM machines, right? We check
Hmm.
the spike of the blood sugar, blood glucose after consuming a meal, right?
Right.
Not consuming a food, right? So you don't
Correct.
you don't say, let me first eat rice, then I'll eat dal, then I'll eat, chapati. It doesn't work like that, right? Right. So you
Yeah.
actually, there's a meal, and you really can't know what is spiking your blood sugar. That is first thing. Second thing is
Absolutely.
that if you are managing this, what is happening is that you are not stopping the blood sugar level from spiking. You're actually slowing down the spike, right?
Hmm.
So
Hmm.
you see,
Hmm. Hmm.
it's like, hitting your beta cells. It's a lot of pressure on beta cells, right? So
Correct.
every time you are slowing down your spike, you're making your beta cells overwork, right?
Hmm. Hmm.
And over a
Hmm.
period of time, you don't have to put so much pressure on your beta cell. Over a period of time, this is going to lead to insulin resistance, right? Because your beta
Correct.
cell would become inefficient to release insulin, right? So that is my view, right? That CGM machines can tell you whether your blood sugar level is going to spike or not after a meal, first thing, right? That's just to manage your
Hmm.
blood sugar level. But again, if your blood sugar
Correct.
level is high, probably you will never reverse diabetes, because you've already crossed the boat, right? It's
Yeah.
it's it's always focus on the insulin spike, not on the blood sugar HbA1c spike, right? And then again, you're
Right.
putting unwanted pressure. So let me ask you, sir, what do you think about the high
Hmm.
protein diet?
So see, even I believe as a biologist, I believe in balancing. I believe in,
Hmm.
ensuring that, nothing is overloaded and nothing is underloaded, so the balance is very important. So people who take
Hmm.
a lot of proteins are actually putting a lot of load on their metabolic pathways by giving so much proteins and then amino acids and polypeptides and then enzymes to
mm,
digest that and the byproducts of
mhm,
the protein. Anything
mm,
in excess is bad. I just give you a simple
right,
example. Doodh,
mm,
doodh or ghee or anything.
mm,
These are not. I'm not talking only about proteins. I'm giving you an example. Milk,
mm,
which is needed in moderate amount. If you
mm,
overdo, it's bad for the body. Same with the proteins.
mm,
Same with
mm,
uh, most of the stuff we eat. So
mm.
over to you. In terms of microbiome or in terms of
Mm.
metabolism. What have you found out, particularly on the protein uptake, excess
Yeah.
protein uptake, I would say.
So there are two things to it, right? So our body needs amino acid needs protein for a lot of biosynthesis. So for instance, when we are falling short of energy or when we are fatigued, right? If there are certain genes our expression of certain genes increases tells that we need certain foods, right? And now we start eating some carbs and fats, right, which are source of glucose and ketones, right? But the thing is, for
Right.
all the energy to be delivered to you, the energy has to reach to mitochondria. So mitochondria does the task. It gives you ATP, right, which is adenyl-triphosphate, right?
Correct.
So essentially that gives you energy, right? But for these energy sources to travel to mitochondria, there has to be a transport mechanism. That transport mechanism, somewhere it
Absolutely.
is fat, somewhere it is ammonia, somewhere it is amino acids, right? Again, we
Correct.
need protein for building blocks, for a lot of building blocks, for taking care of muscles and a lot of these things, right? But the thing is, excess protein is something, it goes to your microbiome and, because your body is dynamic. So your microbiome says, oh, I don't know what protein is, let me ferment it, right? And they start fermenting and releases bad
Correct.
things like puts in ammonia, methane, and a lot of these stuffs and hydroxyl sulfate, right? Which are the toxins, right? And which change our physiology, right? That is one thing. So essentially, high protein diets are connected with even, risk of heart diseases, right? Like TMAO, if you eat a lot of choline foods, right? Like chicken and all, right? Chicken, eggs, and eggs is choline. So if you have a lot of proteobacteria, so it can be converted to TMAO. TMAO can cause, plague in arteries and all these things. But from a diabetes perspective, right? When we are taking too much of protein, we assume that if I replace my carbs with proteins, right, my blood sugar level will not spike, but it doesn't happen like that, It slows down your blood sugar level and it puts your pressure on your beta cells, right? So every time you're taking too much protein,
Beta
you are
cells, yeah.
actually making your beta cells overwork, and then there's a chance of insulin resistance, right? So essentially,
Mhm.
first of all, we have to understand, how a particular food is being metabolized, whether it is going to whether it is going to trigger insulin release or not, right? So that is something what we have to
Right.
look. For
Right.
instance, if I tell you, that uh, almonds, almonds can cause type 2
Hmm.
diabetes, no one would believe because almond doesn't spike your sugar level, right? Because
Hmm. Hmm.
almond
Hmm.
is high in
Correct.
bitrate also, but it is you have to see not only one food, you have to see combination with others. So almond may not spike, but if you're eating something which is triggering a lot of LPS activity inside the body, right? So oxalate or uric acid can further escalate this LPS production, and which can have a lot of uh, issues which
Right.
can lead to adiposity, which can impact your insulin sensitivity, right? So that's what when we were
Correct.
we were actually building this we thought that why don't we focus on the uh, regulating the insulin response rather than trying to fix HbA1c levels, right? This is the biggest problem we
Hmm.
see. HbA1c, my HbA1c is high, so your doctor will say, oh, you have diabetes, you start taking metformin, right? So, it's already the story is over because if you are seeing your HbA1c, you can't reverse diabetes, right? So that's what we see.
Hmm.
So the
Correct.
interaction between the food you eat and the microbiome, right, triggers a situation where
Hmm.
insulin spikes and glucose spikes and your HbA1c spikes, right? So essentially, what we
Right.
see here is that what we have built is we
Hmm.
have built and prediction model now, a machine learning led
Okay.
prediction model, right? Where
That's
we
very
can
interesting.
based on your gut microbiome, right? We can tell you,
Hmm.
if a food is
Hmm.
going to spike your insulin or not even before you consume it. I'm
Oh,
not talking of blood sugar or blood glucose. I'm talking of insulin here, right? Our aim is insulin sensitivity. For instance, if you see this graph, right, we see the antioxidant things, right? So anti-inflammatory things, right? So short chain fatty acids, right,
Correct.
which we know bitrate, acetate, and propionate, right? It is acetate is responsible for releasing GLP, secreting GLP-1 and PYY. We know GLP-1 is responsible for slowing gastric emptying, and it insulin synthesis and a lot of these things, right? Which regulates our blood sugar
Correct.
response, right? Uh, Indole acetate again here. Uh, Again, I'm covering indole acetate and indole propionic acid are a byproduct of tryptophan, again an amino acid, right? So again, it now here's a very interesting thing, sir. So you see,
Okay.
certain microbes in your gut can convert tryptophan into AA and IPA, indole acetate and indole propionic acid, right? And certain
Okay.
microbes can convert tryptophan into indoxyl sulfate also. Indoxyl sulfate is something, which can trigger kidney disease. It's toxin, right? So essentially, it
Okay.
depends upon how tryptophan is being metabolized. So when we look at someone's gut microbiome, this is only the gut microbiome. I'm not covered the oral microbiome as of now, right? But
Right.
we see it as bitrate production, acetate production, propionate production, right? We see the indole acetate production. We see the indole propionic acid. We see the glutamine production also, glutamate, right? It also on a marginal level regulates the insulin sensitivity, right? Similarly, S2S production, which is again sulfur. When we consume sulfur, so sulfur has
Hydrosulfide.
so
Yeah.
it has an impact on regulating insulin sensitivity, right?
Correct.
So some foods are resistant starch, which gives you a CFA. Then amino acids, B vitamin absorptions, which really help in. So B vitamin like vitamin B9, B12, really help in regulating insulin sensitivity, right?
Right.
On the flip side, we see the pro-inflammatory aspect as well, right? Which is what we call as LPS, lipopolysaccharides. Again, lipopolysaccharides are as an end product of a lot of sugar and a lot of saturated fat what we eat, right? It can cross your gut. It can go to your beta cells. It can attack your pancreas. It can attack your. It can lead to adiposity. It can attack your heart, right? So LPS is an relevant biomarker for type 2 diabetes or cardiovascular disease, right? Again, glucose metabolism, how well your body is metabolizing glucose, right? It can actually either spike or regulate, right? Similarly, uric acid. Now here's an interesting part, right? So we know nitric oxide, right? Nitric oxide is released by our microbiome, both oral
Right.
and gut, right? And nitric oxide is something which regulates our insulin sensitivity, right? Now uric acid is and topics need to be discussed in detail, but here we will cover a bit, right? Uric acid. We think uric acid is a byproduct of purines. It is not only purines, but purines. Research has found that purines does not increase or escalate the uric acid level so much. It is it is this fructose, right?
Yeah.
Fructose. So the PAX juices is what we eat. The what do you say, the toppings. If you go to a Starbucks, you do these toppings on the coffee. That's really full of fructose, right? So these all things actually, if you have certain microbes, right, it can spike. It can lead to production of uric acid. Again, uric acid suppresses nitric oxide, which is said to cause insulin resistance, right? Similarly, oxalate metabolism. For oxalate metabolism individually does not cause spike, but when combined with LPS, it can lead to insulin spike, right? Tyramine, precresol, again a byproduct of tyrosine, again an amino acid. So people think, high consumption of amino acid can suppress your blood sugar level. It's all fad, it's all facade, right? So I mentioned about precresol, which is tyrosine, right? Again, imidazole propionate is an byproduct of histidine. Histidine again is an amino acid, right?
Amino
Uh,
acid.
yeah, and this is a very very important. So fucose, right? So fucose is a sugar molecule found in our gut lining, right? And it occurs found in a lot of foods, right? So essentially,
Right.
if we are getting in a low carb or a high low carb diet, right, or sort of what we call is very restrictive diet, right? So
Right.
what
Yeah.
happens is your microbes are actually very hungry, so they go to your gut lining, start eating focus, and spikes your blood sugar level, right?
Right.
So essentially, we are looking at your microbiome profile, functions. We convert your functions into these biological pathways. So a
Mm.
blend of, so again, it's a very complex model, these you see these 14, 15 scores, right, which are there. So we see
Mm.
the pro-inflammatory, anti-inflammatory activity for every food, right?
Mm.
We
Mm.
determine whether a food is going to spike your insulin or not. And
Not.
even not even a single food, probably we'll see, okay, if I eat potato, right,
Mm.
it is
Mm.
not going to spike my blood sugar level or blood insulin level. But if I eat that with, suppose, white rice, it is
Mm.
going to spike, right? So we
Yeah.
see a combination of one food with others in terms of determining the insulin sensitivity or the spike in insulin.
Mm.
So,
Mm.
this is something what we are building. So you don't need a CGM machine to track your blood sugar level or blood glucose level, right?
Right.
Uh,
Correct.
Based on your microbiome, probably you can even prevent the insulin from spiking, right?
Spiking.
So
Yeah.
so you
It's a
may
very
not even
useful
develop diabetes.
information. This is a very useful information for all the guys, who are worried about diabetes or who want to prevent diabetes or who want to understand the mechanism. What you are talking makes absolute sense, and I think everyone should look at this rather than looking at glycemic index. We should look at insulin spike and what is causing that insulin spike. So excellent work. I would say can help billions of people here.
Yeah, and one more thing I want to add is, so if someone is saying that, okay, we can get you off medicines, we can reverse diabetes, there's nothing, you can't reverse diabetes. If you have diabetes, right,
Mhm.
it's a large stage, you cannot reverse it, right?
Correct. Absolutely.
Okay, you may go off medicines because of certain regulation in your blood spike for some time, right? But it is not going to reverse diabetes, right? So
Reverse.
again, diabetes starts 15 years back, right? So the problem is we are not at fault, right? The
Mhm.
problem is our healthcare system was never developed to decode those pro-inflammatory molecules being released by the body, right?
Absolutely.
We
Absolutely.
we are really living a symptom care healthcare management solution, right?
Absolutely.
So
True.
this
Very
is
relevant.
really, yeah.
Very relevant. Absolutely.
Yeah. So this is something what we will be doing so for from maybe September onwards, right?
Okay.
Uh, Everyone who signs for our gut microbiome or oral microbiome test, right? They
Hmm.
will have this model at place so they can see whether his food is going to spike my blood insulin level or not before I consume, right?
Correct. Correct.
And there's no additional cost for this. It will be part of our entire program, right? Entire
Mhm.
subscription membership which we will take, right? So
Right.
you don't need a CGM now. You don't need to spend a lot of money on CGM to
Hmm.
track your biology, measure your biology. You don't need your blood sugar levels.
Correct. 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 Absolutely. Absolutely. Makes absolute sense. Uh, so I'm sure, audience must have benefited a lot from the discussion what we had. And
Yeah.
uh, we are going to talk about it, in more and more detail so that more and more
Yeah.
people can actually understand the science behind it and how they can prevent. I would say,
Mm.
youngsters should actually look at it, and they can prevent, the onset of diabetes, rather than, somebody who has already developed diabetes. Of course, diabetes, somebody is having it, he can control it as well. Uh,
Mm.
so a lot of meaningful stuff we are discussing here. Anything, Sushant, you want to add, and then probably we can close.
Yeah. One more thing here is, so essentially, insulin is also one of the, key proponents of our brain health because brain works, insulin is an energy source for brain, right? So any
Mm.
dysregulation in insulin
Mhm.
is going to also increase so your risk of developing Alzheimer's going
Mhm.
forward, right? So
Uh,
essentially, that's why Alzheimer's or dementia is called type 3 diabetes, right?
mhm.
So, so, so essentially, this is really important to understand your insulin spike, right? And and do not go blindly that if I eat wheat, it is going to spike my blood sugar level. If it is spiking for my friend, it is spike for me also. It's entirely different. And it is not based on your blood work or CGMs, right? Don't put pressure on your beta cells. You're putting
Right.
pressure on your beta cells, right? So
Mm,
don't do that, you know. Rather understand your biology, you know, how you're
mm,
spiking,
mm.
how we can control that spike. Right? That
Excellent.
is really, really important.
Sure, sure, sure. So thank you very much,
Yes,
Sushant.
sir.
I think this was a very good, meaningful talk, and we will keep bringing such information and science behind this whole chronic disease development from time to time.
Yeah.